Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and I say broadcast because in the era we live in, the broadcast is awesome promotion for the podcast. You can find the Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast player, especially the iHeartRadio app. I also like the Pocket Casts app on Android, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts. You can ask Alexa to play the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. You can find it anywhere. Just search for it in your favorite podcast app. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. That's Geek Therapy Radio. Okay, so this week we lost a legend in the computing world. If you may have just kind of seen it in a sort of a passerby kind of way on your Facebook feed, Larry Tesler died. He is the guy who invented the copy and paste command. So what I wanted to do, at least in this first segment of Geek Therapy Radio, was go over the bullet points of his life. And this won't be an exhaustive biography of his life, but it's just kind of the bullet points so that you know a little bit more about the man. I hate it when you see that, oh, somebody died, and then that's all you know is, oh, this is the guy who created copy and paste. Yes, that's huge, but there was so much more to him, and I want to go over that now, just so you know a little bit more about the man, because he was way, way more influential than a little fly-by-night Facebook post that may have flown by your feed would lead you to believe. Larry Tesler was born April 24th, 1945 in the Bronx, New York. And while he was in high school at the Bronx High School of Science, he showed a teacher an algorithm he came up with for generating prime numbers, and the teacher thus encouraged him to naturally pursue computers. Before he actually entered college, he was able to make his way into the computer lab at Columbia. I don't know how he was able to make his way or get some deal, get himself into the doors at Columbia University. But he did, and for 30 minutes per week, he was able to use the computer lab, and this is where he taught himself programming. He was very young when all of this happened. He was accepted into Stanford at the age of 16, where he studied computer science and then graduated 4 years later in 1965 with a degree in mathematics. So after that, for a time, he freelanced. I don't wish freelancing on my worst enemy, unless you're doing well, but freelancing is tough. Anyways, he worked as a freelancer, as a computer programmer, and he stayed quite busy for the time there in the mid to late 60s. He just listed himself in the phone book as a computer programmer, and that was that. In the late 60s, he worked at SAIL, Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and he was a big-time hippie, and he leaned heavily into the counterculture of the area. He would lean heavily into counterculture his entire life. That's a big defining factor of Larry Tesler, big-time hippie. He left SAIL in the early 1970s, and one reason being that he realized that artificial intelligence wouldn't be a usable technology for quite some years to come, and he was absolutely right. After that, he had recently been divorced, and he moved with his daughter to Oregon, where he found it tough to find work in his field. So, fast forwarding just a tad, an ex-coworker brought him to work at Xerox, and he did most of his most famous work at Xerox. While Tesler was there working on a program called Gypsy, the first GUI-based WYSIWYG. Sorry, it's always hard to read that out loud, but it stands for what you see is what you get, word processing. He and colleague Tim Mott developed the copy and paste function, which is easily one of the most revolutionary components of modern word processing. Because before then, you just had to type the same thing over and over and forget about it if you were using an actual typewriter. It involved whiteout or just retyping the entire paper most of the time. So here's a few things about Tesler. He was instrumental in inspiring Steve Jobs to adopt the Graphical User Interface, or GUI. After Jobs paid a couple of visits to Xerox, Jobs, being the way that Jobs was, went back to Apple and cracked the whip, and this is why the Apple Lisa was the first Macintosh to have a GUI complete with keyboard and mouse. Like almost anything else Apple has ever done, someone else came up with the technology first, and Steve Jobs made it sexy and sold it. Now, this sentiment is only half of a low blow, since Tesler himself left Xerox to work at Apple and bring the GUI to Lisa. Jobs didn't steal the technology, he just hired the guy who helped develop it. Kind of like how Elon Musk doesn't actually build rockets with his company's name on it, or Tesla automobiles. Musk didn't invent the electric car, he just created a company to make EVs people actually wanted to buy, just like Steve Jobs did with personal computers. It's programmers and engineers like Larry Tesler that actually create technology. Jobs and Musk are just way better at selling it. So, more about Tesler. He is unofficially credited with coining the phrase, "what you see is what you get," WYSIWYG, regarding word processors. What you see is what you get word processing was born out of the frustration that previously anything you typed on the screen would not be duplicated once printed. Not exactly. All the formatting and paragraphs and everything like that. So you can thank Tesler for your documents looking like how you type them. So to start wrapping this up, while he was at Apple, Tesler was assigned to the Apple Newton Project, which was a PDA in the 90s that would pave the way for the iPad and tablets we know today. Some would argue also, perhaps correctly so, that Microsoft and Bill Gates led the way with tablets, but either way, Tesler was assigned to the Apple Newton Project, which would pave the way at least for the iPad. So later in life, Tesler would work for companies like Amazon and Yahoo, helping them to improve their user experience, which makes sense because he was a major pioneer of the graphical user interface, which made things easier on computer users who didn't have to 100% rely on a keyboard anymore and keyboard commands. Now you had a mouse and icons and tiles on the screen, made it a lot easier. He was famously, quote, anti-mode in terms of user interfaces. So modes are things like the caps lock, numlock, etc. His idea was that eliminating modes would reduce input errors. So instead of having one key for a lowercase t and an uppercase t, you just have an individual key for both. Of course, how something like that would be implemented is completely up for debate. Tesler passed away in Portola Valley, California, February 16th, 2020. So now you can impress your friends at the bar with some Tesler nuggets of knowledge beyond copy and paste. We'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. Got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I hope you enjoyed the previous segment, delving a little bit into the life of Larry Tesler, the man who invented copy and paste. I just want to do him a little bit more of a tribute that you may have seen briefly flying across your social media feed. So, funny story, interesting story. Well, that may be subjective, but right before I cracked the microphone here to record this segment, yes, it's recorded, I got an email from a listener, and I always love getting emails from listeners. So if you've ever been hesitating to send me an email, go for it. GeekTherapy@iheartmedia.com. I always repeat it twice. The email is geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. You can also do the Facebook and all that kind of good stuff. Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Just Geek Therapy Radio everywhere. Also, geektherapyradio.com has a contact portal. Anyways, listener reaches out, and a few weeks ago we were talking, and he said he may get a tattoo on his arm. His name is Dan. That's not giving away too much. My listener Dan has got the Triforce Zelda tattoo on his arm. It looks awesome. I'm pretty jealous. I don't know. Ooh, that's got me thinking. Ooh, that's a good question to you listeners. Is there something? Is there a video game? Let's keep it. Yeah. Is there a video game or a band or something similar that you would want as a tattoo on your own body? A tattoo is not a light decision, and I know Dan said he's been thinking about it for a long time. That's been my only criteria and my only warning or a bit of advice for getting a tattoo. I have a couple of tattoos myself. Once you pop, you can't stop. But my only advice was always think about it. Think about it for a long time. It sucks, Don't just get drunk one night and go out and get a tattoo. That's going to be on you forever, and the only way to get it off is 10 times as expensive, if not more so, and even more painful. You're using lasers to remove a tattoo, so it's permanent. Just think about it. You're marking your body forever. You're always going to have the scar of it, even if you do try to get it removed. So just think about it for a long while and get something that really means a lot to you. So if it really means a lot to you, if you have a lot of history and a lot of connection and a lot of sentiment and a lot of emotion tied up in something like Zelda, I know a lot of people get the Triforce tattoos, and I know some listening right now may think that it's all stupid, that it's a very stupid thing. Getting a video game tattoo on your arm. Let me just reshape this conversation a little bit. Let me come at it from an angle that you may not have thought about. We are at that age. I am 36 years old, and there are folks a little bit younger and folks quite a bit older, not by like decades. But anybody listening to this right now, older millennials, young boomers, we kind of grew up with video games, especially us millennials, and we have a lot of emotion and sentiment attached to something like the Zelda Triforce symbol. It reminds us of our dad. It reminds us of our mom. Maybe we spent time playing Zelda with our mom or dad. Maybe we couldn't get through a particular dungeon or some area of The Legend of Zelda for the NES or Link's Awakening or anything like that, and we had to hand the controller off to our dad or mom, and they had to get through the tough part of this game, and then maybe our parent passed away or something, and it's just a really nice memory we have. We have so much emotion and sentiment tied into that video game that the Triforce symbol in this example is so much more than just a video game. You're looking at it and you're thinking, this reminds me of my dad. This reminds me of my mom. This reminds me of my brother who may have passed away, or my sister who may have passed away. This reminds me of just the good times with friends and family and loved ones. Or it could be that, I think in a lot of cases, and I didn't know this is where I was going to go with this segment, but I think that, and this is fine for Geek Therapy Radio, I think that in a lot of cases, I won't beat around the bush. A lot of us got bullied growing up for playing video games. Maybe some of us had a rough home life, and video games, they say video games can be an escape. They say video games are an escape, but for some of us, that was our only refuge. That really, really was a true escape in every sense of the word. You can lock your way inside a room, some corner of the house where no one can bother you, and your mind can be eased and lifted from the pain that you endure every single day, day in, day out. You come home from school and you got picked on for 8 hours that day, and you come home and maybe Link is waiting there for you. Your adventure can continue with Link. Final Fantasy, all sorts of other RPGs. Maybe it wasn't even RPGs. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was a board game. Maybe it was checkers. Maybe it was computer programming. Maybe it was your old Commodore 64. Maybe it was your old Packard Bell, computer with a 386 or a 486 in it. Whatever. That was an escape. That was peace. That was peace. That was peace. In a world where we're constantly searching for real peace, a lot of us found our real peace in video games or in computers or art or your geek thing, whatever your geek thing is. Maybe it was building Pine Derby cars. Maybe it was building actual go-karts. Maybe it was working on your car with your dad. Maybe you see someone walking down the street with I don't like Ford Mustangs, but maybe if you see some guy walking down the street or girl and they have a Mustang or a Ford logo or something tattooed somewhere on them, and you may think that's silly getting a brand tattooed on your body. people don't usually get tattoos for no reason. Not usually. And that Mustang symbol or that Ford symbol on that person has 99.9% to do with the bond they forged working on an old Mustang with their dad, their grandfather, maybe possibly even their mother, depending on how cool she was or how into cars she was. But there's an attachment there. It always has to do with family and with love and with some sort of deep, deep, deep attachment. And the other 0.1% is the car. Or the other 0.1% is the Zelda video game itself. There's so much more wrapped up in tattoos like that. I guess since I'm on the subject, I'll talk about my tattoos. My first tattoo I ever got, I was 19 years old, and I got it on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood. Funny story about it. So it's on my ring finger, and it's a little teeny tiny cross. And yes, it's a very religious thing to me. It's a little cross that I always intended to be hidden underneath my wedding ring to kind of symbolize my faith and what's holding things together when things are good and when things are tough. Kind of just always a reminder there. That's just the sappy bit from me. But before I got the tattoo, the guy who got up from the chair right before me was blind. I am not kidding you. I can verify this with one of my best friends, Andrew, who's been on the show before. It was a blind guy, and he turns to me to show me his shoulder blade. He goes, "Is that an eagle?" I said, "Yeah, it's an eagle." He's like, "Good. Now I have proof, unless you're both lying to me." Awesome, the trust that guy had. So anyways, I had I got my cross on my ring finger, and then I have on my right arm a tri-tipped tattoo with spikes pointing to my hand, with the innermost spike being a cross, just like the cross I have on my finger, the outermost spike being 16th notes, music notes, and the third spike being a heart. So the cross represents faith, the music obviously represents my biggest geek thing, and the heart represents friends and family. And I thought so long about that tattoo before I got it. I'm very happy I did get it. More Geek Therapy Radio to come. Hope you're enjoying it. I can't clack. Hope you're enjoying it so far. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I say Geek Therapy Radio broadcast because a broadcast in this day and age is good promotion for the podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast app. Of course, we prefer the iHeartRadio app here at iHeartMedia. But just when you type in Geek Therapy Radio, look for the red, white, and black color scheme. That's me. There's another Geek Therapy Network or something like that. I have no affiliation with it. Their color is green. I could not be more opposite-er than that. So as long as you're looking at something red, black, or white, or any combination thereof, that's Geek Therapy Radio. That's me. So going into segment 3 here, I want to kind of continue a little bit about the tattoo I have on my arm where we left off on the last segment of Geek Therapy Radio. Let's talk about tattoos and the meaning behind the tattoos. So when I first got this tattoo, and I'll probably put a picture of it up on my social media somewhere. When I first got the tattoo, I only did the wire outline. So it's just a completely black tattoo. So I just had black lines. So the black outline of the 3 spikes in the band around my forearm, the cross on the middle of one of them, the music notes, and the heart. Of course, all just black wireframe, basically, like a 3D rendering in a computer without the texture added to it yet, like an AutoCAD design without textures added to it yet. So, anyways, it's the scaffolding of a tattoo. And when I got the wireframe, I was telling the tattoo artist, I said, so I'm thinking I might get it filled in later on. And he just kept saying, or he said, he tried to implore me. It's like, if you're thinking about getting it filled in, I just encourage you to get it filled in now, because it's going to be an extra $300, or whatever, separate dollars to get it filled in later, versus I'm already doing it right now. It's not going to cost much extra since we're already out. I already have the black ink out, already set up. So if you want to do it, I encourage you to do it now. I said, yeah, but this is going to be on me forever. So in the grand scheme of forever, I'm willing to spend a little bit more later if I decide to do so than get something done that I am not planning, that I may not want. I can't just take an eraser to it and undo the black fill-in. So I had it just the black wireframe for a few months, probably several months, before I went back in and decided. Because once I had the black wireframe, I would fill it in from time to time with a Sharpie or a black marker, because I could see relatively temporarily how it would look filled in with black. And so I did that non-destructively. We edit a lot of things. We're geeks about stuff. Edit video, edit audio, non-destructive edits. You guys know what I'm talking about. I did a non-destructive edit to my tattoo, decided that I wanted to keep it. So I'm getting nerdy with this. I froze the track. I rendered it out that way. I went to the tattoo parlor and had him render it out, filled in black. So that's the final story behind my forearm tattoo. And I had to think for a second. Do I have any other tattoos? Is there a spot on my body that I wouldn't know about that maybe my friends... The further I get into this ridiculous story, the stupider it gets. So I'm just going to stop. I was just going to say, is there a part of my body that I can't see with a mirror that maybe my friends were able to tattoo on me while I was asleep? That's really, really dumb. Okay, so moving on. I worked on a video this week. Let me back up a little bit and say that I've had a video in the works that I did not upload recently. That's not what I'm talking about. I've had a video in the works for a long time, for a few months. And that is, do you remember the old, it sounds weird to say old, but the processor, the Intel processor, the Q6600, it was the first, I believe, it was one of the first true quad-core processors, non-hyper-threaded, for consumers. It came out in 2007, clocked at 2.4 gigahertz. It was a good overclocker as well. Blah, blah, blah. I wanted to make a video to see how that quad-core processor from 2007 would hold up. I almost said in 2015. Fast forward a little bit more, Johnny. 2020. I wanted to see how the Q6600 would hold up in 2020. And so I did. The script I had written for it was 7 or 8 pages long. I had shot so much B-roll for it, and I recorded the voiceover, and the voiceover, long story short, the video would have been over 40 minutes long, 40 minutes. And so that's not the end of the world for a YouTube video. There are long YouTube videos out there, but it just kind of dawned on me, like, I'm going into way too much depth about this Q6600. This is a processor that came out in 2007 that virtually nobody cares about. And I know there's a niche of us, yes, who are interested in the Q6600, but everything to be said about the Q6600 has been said over the last almost 15 years. So I'm going back to the drawing board with the video. It got beyond the scope of what I was trying to do with it, which was basically just kind of document my tinkering with it, kind of my basic findings that, okay, in the year 2020, the Q6600, how well can it play a modern video game? How well is it how good can it do it at content creation, video editing, audio editing, and how good is it just at day-to-day computing, just getting online, checking emails, watching YouTube, all sorts of stuff. And I was pairing different graphics cards with it all the way up to the most recent card I have, which is a GTX 980. How big of a bottleneck would the Q6600 be? but still kind of backing away from having it be too in-depth, getting too in the weeds with it. I wanted to approach this as just a very light-hearted, fun kind of, the whole idea of it was just to kind of inspire the viewer to say, what kind of old crap do I have laying around in some drawers? Some old computer stuff that I have laying around. What can I do with it? What would this machine be good for? Would it be good for a home theater machine? Is it something that I'd be willing to, build out again, get running again, and use as a home theater server, as a network attached storage? Like, what could I do with an old computer? I have this computer from 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Here's an old Pentium 4 or whatever. What can I think? What can I squeeze out of it in 2020? That was the angle I was coming at. Or that's the angle that I want to come at doing the Q6600 video. And 8 pages of voiceover, of script is way too much. 40 minutes, it's too much. So basically I'm just going through and I'm slicing it down, whittling it down. I would rather keep it under 20 minutes. Ideally, I'd rather keep it around 10 minutes. I don't think there's any way I can get away with doing a video about this under 10 minutes. But so anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes, that'll be way more acceptable. By the way, since the internet's a thing and Google exists, while I'm doing the show here, I was looking up Intel's first consumer grade, like desktop class quad core. And it was the QX6700, the Core 2 Extreme QX 6700 that came out 2006. This article is from Tom's Hardware, November 13th, 2006. It says upcoming processor, so that might still mean that it came out 2007. Anyways, Kensfield, codename Kensfield. So anyways, yeah, the first quad core was the QX6700. That's neither here nor there. The Q6600 was a more, not lower tier, but it was more accessible to more people, even though it was fairly expensive. I want to say it was around $500 when that processor came out. It was a good gaming processor to have. It was a good all-around processor. It was one of the best processors you could get in 2007. So anyways, I did upload a video. That's a big roundabout way. I like letting you know what I'm doing behind the scenes here at Geek Therapy Radio. Plus, I get to talk about nerdy things like an old Q6600. I did upload a video today, as of recording, that is a behind-the-scenes look at what I do here at the radio station. My normal 9-to-5 quote-unquote job is over at our sister station, KTRH, where I am the board operator, and I screen phone calls for the Michael Berry Show. So it gave a little bit of behind the scenes of what it's like to run a radio station. You hear us do it all the time. You're listening to the radio right now if you're driving around, or listening to the broadcast, however you're listening to the broadcast. So it's a glimpse of how a radio station works, but more importantly, behind the scenes of Geek Therapy Radio, kind of what I do, my production process, my home studio, the DeLorean's in that video, all sorts of cool stuff is in the video, old video game systems, kind of a tour of my home studio. My stupid cat Jack made it into the video. So it's very fun. I uploaded it to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked out the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, there's all sorts of fun, cool stuff on there. Just search Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube and subscribe away. And it's a good way to communicate with me also. James, yes, I see you're the first person on the video. You are first. Got it. Gotcha, buddy. I'm going to heart your comment. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Hope you've been enjoying the show so far. Depending on when you're listening to this, I will actually, you know what? They told me to keep it evergreen. So I'm, you know what? Screw it. Right now, it airs at 10 p.m. Saturday nights and 6 p.m. on Sundays. I just got that new 6 p.m. slot. My eternal gratitude for you listening and helping it move to the 6 p.m. slot. Please tell your friends about Geek Therapy Radio. I can't explain enough how much I appreciate that you do listen, and that you are telling your friends about it, and that you are listening to the podcast of it. that every time I upload a podcast, I can see, I obviously can't see you are, but I can see numbers come in and that you are listening. I very, very much appreciate that. So I love when you share it with your friends and family. And if you are dedicated and you listen to the actual broadcast of it, because let's face it, broadcast doesn't have the ease of access that a podcast does. As a podcast, you can listen to it whenever you want. So if you listen to the broadcast each week, either at 10 p.m. Saturday night or 6 p.m. Sunday evenings, I love you for it. Something I wanted to get to before I forget. So I just spent at least the tail end of the last segment talking about a video I uploaded to YouTube that I did a tour of my home studio and went over like the gear that I have and things like that. I even got down nitty gritty just for a second or two, just because I know there's audio geeks listening or watching. I showed the settings that I was using for the compressor plugin, settings I was using for my EQ on my voice, just because I know there are people out there that are into that. Speaking of that, I would love to see your home setup. If you are a musician or if you're a podcaster, if you do any sort of creative audio work or video work, or you're a painter, or you have a clay studio, or whatever you do, your man cave, your garage, the tools, show me your toolkit, brah. That was stupid. But I would love to see your tools, honestly. Well, here's where I keep my Dremel. Here's where I keep my my right angle edge grinder thing, whatever your toolkit is. If you work on cars, I want to see your shop. I want to see your garage. I want to see your studio. I want to see your easel. I want to see your paints. I want to see your freaking guitars. Oh, please show me your guitars. I love looking at guitars. Looking at guitars is kind of like the same feeling you get when you look at, when you look at a lot of stuff. You look at an old Jaguar E-Type. They look so good. It's from an era when human beings designed cars, human beings designed objects, and then they hammered out the shapes of that metal with their muscles and their sweat and created beautiful things in that way. I get the same feeling when I look at a handcrafted guitar. I'll accept if it's a made in China thing, but it was designed beautifully and it uses good materials. Nothing's going to replace an American-made Stratocaster or an American-made Gibson or an American-made Martin, or the boutique vendors, the smaller manufacturers. I love all that kind of stuff. So if you have guitars or a home studio, tell me what kind of speakers you're working with. Show me your microphones. I would just love to see what you're working with. Show me your geek thing. Whatever your geek thing is, show me. I've told you all the ways that you can get it to me. GeekTherapy at iHeartMedia.com, the email. GeekTherapy Radio Facebook, that's super easy. But I would love to see it. This show is for you. I get to geek out about the stuff that I'm feeling that I want to geek out about, but it's equally just as important that I get fed by my audience, and I love to hear about your geek things. And very often I will talk about that geek thing on the air. I started out the second segment with that I just got an email from a listener about his Zelda Triforce tattoo, and then I just went off. Basically, half the show, at least timing-wise, was about tattoos, or thereabouts, halfway. Also, I'll remind you that, you know what? I'm going to say something that you'll never hear on daytime broadcast radio or drive time broadcast radio. I'm going to tell you something crazy, absolutely crazy. Maybe some host would say this, but not enough do. I'm going to tell you something. I'm wrong sometimes. I say the wrong things sometimes. The information that I give sometimes can be inaccurate. That's why I love getting listener feedback, because I believe in sharing accurate information. There's so much misinformation. Get on Facebook for 5 minutes and you will be 5 IQ points dumber. You will have so much misinformation, biased nonsense in your head And I don't believe in doing that on Geek Therapy Radio. So anytime I share information, I try to come at it openly and honestly saying, hey, this little thing I said or I'm about to say, I'm not a complete expert on this thing. And I implore you to do your own research or just take what I say with a grain of salt because I am capable of being wrong. It is not a weakness in this day and age to accept that you can be wrong about something. It's a strength. Knowing your weakness is strength. Admitting that you can be wrong about something, admitting that you're open to change your mind about something is a strength. It's weak to follow the herd. It's weak. Mob mentality is weak, weak, weak. So I'm just telling you right now on Geek Therapy Radio, at the risk of looking like I don't know what I'm talking about, sometimes I will admit that I get things wrong, and that's when I reach out to my audience, and that's where you can help pick up the slack and email me and not text me, but Twitter me or whatever about some fact or information. Because let's face it, maybe I'm going to hit on a subject. I often do this. I hit on subjects, passing by subjects that I'm not an expert on, but you are. The first segment was all about Tesler, the guy who created a copy and paste function. There might be some stuff in there that wasn't entirely accurate, and I'll just let you behind the curtain a little bit. Most of it came from Wikipedia. I checked against some other things, and the information I would assume and I know to be at least 99.9% correct. And the stuff that might not be correct might have something more to do with programming. Maybe you're a computer programmer and you know way, way more about computer programming than I do, because I am not a computer programmer. But I love to hear, in this example, from computer programmers who can shed light on things, maybe shed light on things in a different way that I haven't thought about. Maybe shed some light on things that maybe I'm ignorant of, and therefore I can reshare that with you, the listener, and create an atmosphere where we share good information with each other. We don't just spout our mouths off like we know what we're talking about. That happens way too much. It happens way too much on the radio today. I cannot imagine some hosts. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus here. I'm not talking about anyone in our radio station or in this radio family, but there are an awful lot of people you listen to that will just say things like it's absolute gospel, God himself spoken truth. And they say it with confidence because it seems like coming across confident is more important than coming off correct. That's a lost art these days. So like I said, I would rather speak to something and say, there's a chance here I might not be 100% correct. Please email me if you know more about this than I do. Reach out to me in any other way if you're an expert on this subject, because I would rather get the correct information out to my listeners than just act confident and say stupid things confidently. That's a whole thing. That's been a whole thing since 24 Hours News Network's been around. We have so mistaken commentary for news. Where do you get your news from? The Daily Show. Where do you get your news from? Sean Hannity. That's not news. That's commentary. And there's nothing wrong with it. Please, trust me. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm just saying that please make the distinction between news and commentary. Anyways, that's going to do it. I'm getting all fired up here right at the end of the show. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Visit my friends at Best Automotive in Kingwood. They take care of Rowdy. They take care of your classic cars, modern or classic cars. They have classics just all around the shop. It's fun to go there and look at. Aaron Best will take really good care of you. More importantly, know that we're all geeks about something. Embrace your geek thing. You're worthy of love and your own self-respect. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.